Winter is such a weird time of year. Every winter, I think about cozying up under some blankets, drinking some hot cocoa, watching a couple of movies, and I just kind of romanticize it in my head, I guess. And then it finally rolls around, and the seasonal depression just hits like a truck. In times like these, I like to turn to movies for some comfort and maybe to lift my spirits a little bit. But a lot of my friends like to tease me for the movies I do like to watch when I'm starting to feel down because they're mostly not really uppers. Today I've made a flowchart though to show my thought process when I'm picking a movie from the depression cave in the middle of winter, and I hope you guys enjoy. I also have to say I tried making this flowchart in Apple's freeform app. It is the most worthless, like least intuitive app I've ever used in my life. Shout out Canva for being there for me in my time of need here. But freeform, oh my god, I spent I think 20 minutes just trying to get 2 lines to really look right. Nothing like snaps to. It's horrible. Now the first question on this flowchart obviously is, am I feeling down? And if not, go watch La La Land, rewind this video 15 seconds, and I'm good to go. If the answer to that first question is yes, the next question I ask myself is, am I sick? Because when I'm sick, I have a very specific type of movie that I'm going to want to revisit, and those are ones that I can just kind of turn my brain off and have a great time. I will always remember back in 2020, the first time I got COVID, I watched 2 things over the course of like that week that I was quarantined, and they were the entirety of The Regular Show and Eli Roth's Hostel, which was just a horrible combination for somebody who was having fever dreams like every night. Now, besides being something that I can just turn my brain off and enjoy, the other thing I want to ask myself is whether or not I'm going to fall asleep. Is this the type of sickness that I'm going to want to put something on, fall asleep, and wake up 30 minutes later and be able to pick back up? Because if so, it's got to be any of the Resident Evil movies. I recently picked up a DVD with all 6 Resident Evil movies on it. I remember the first time I tried to watch them, it was like 1, 2, 4, and 6 were on Max, and the others weren't, so I finally bypassed that problem area. But regardless, every single one of these you can just pop in and enjoy from start to finish. It is seriously just mind-numbingly chaotic and weird. Nothing makes any sense. So if I fall asleep, I'm gonna wake back up and be just as lost as I was at the start of the movie. It's perfect if you think that Mila Jovovich killing a bunch of zombies over the course of like an hour, 40 minutes is your type of thing when you're sick. Then these are absolutely the movies for you. They are so fun. I promise you, you will have a good time. If I'm not feeling any of the Resident Evil movies, then I tend to go back to John Carpenter's Village of the Damned. Chris Reeves is just such a treat in every movie he's in, and this is one of the last ones he ever made before his accident, and it is just so fun to see him having such a great time on set. It feels like everybody in this movie was just having a blast while recording it, and that is the best type of movie to me. If I'm going to be awake through this sickness, I do have certain standards, and I'm going to want something that is still going to be so exciting it's going to take my mind off of whatever's going on, but I also want something that's actually got enough of a plot or enough action to really keep me invested. When I'm thinking about movies like that, the first one that always comes to mind is The Raid. The premise is as simple as it gets. Cop goes into building, cop fights his way through like 30 floors of bad guys, and this movie is absolutely perfect for what it is and what it's trying to be. And I know subtitles can sometimes be a hard sell on me when I'm sick, but honestly, you don't have to have any clue what anybody is saying in this movie to understand exactly what's happening in every second, which is just a testament to a great film. And seriously, the action scenes just front to back are absolutely phenomenal in this movie. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend you check it out, sick or not. If I don't go for The Raid, I'm absolutely going to Catherine Bigelow's masterpiece Point Break. Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves are phenomenal in this movie. It's so fun to just watch them rob banks, surf, skydive. Every piece of this movie is perfect. It has aged tremendously well. If you only watched the remake or haven't seen this in a while, I really encourage you to revisit it. Once again, sick or not, this is just an absolute blast. Now let's go back up the flowchart for a second, and if I'm not sick, maybe I'm feeling homesick. When I'm feeling homesick, I really want a movie that is just going to capture the feeling of being with friends and family and back at home when times were simpler. The one I turn to the most that really captures that vibe the best is Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Linklater is so talented, and he really captures emotions that I can't even describe in all of his movies. Dazed and Confused gets carefree high school fun so right, and it feels like no other movie is even close to it on that aspect. But beneath that carefree high school fun, there are these internal conflicts that you can tell each character is struggling with, and you don't get a lot of dialogue confirming it. You kind of just get to read these characters. Nothing is super obvious, but there's so much subtlety and beauty in that. My favorite piece of this movie, though, is all of the relationships between the characters. There are just so many people in this movie, and because of that, it's impossible to just kind of take character by character and break down each one and show how they're feeling and show exactly who they are. Instead, Linklater decides to portray that through the way they interact with each other, whether that's Ben Affleck bullying people or Matthew McConaughey being a loser. It makes it feel like you know all of these characters because you've had interactions similar either in high school or college or even at work later in life, and no other movie just is able to do it this well. If I'm missing my family more than my friends, then I am gonna usually go to The Mitchells vs. the Machines. This one illustrates some of the most complex family relationships I've ever seen in a film. I know this one flew under the radar a little bit when it came out. I believe it was a Netflix original, and it didn't get a ton of love from the Oscars, but I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. If I'm not homesick, there's a possibility it's winter, which I opened this video talking about. I mean, the seasonal affective can just destroy me on a day-to-day basis. And when I am down because it's winter and because I'm trapped inside, I want a movie where it's also a bleak winter and everybody is sad, so I can feel a little less alone in that. A lot of my buddies don't really get why I watch sad movies when I'm feeling down, but I will get into that a little bit later. For now, let's talk about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I don't want to get a copyright strike here on my very first video, but Row from this movie is the #1 most listened to song on my Spotify Wrapped for 2024, and it is for very good reason. First off, John Bryan is just a musical genius, and his score works so perfectly in this movie. It is maybe the most fitting score I've ever heard. Eternal Sunshine itself has kind of been discussed to death on this platform and really any platform. But I want to talk about one scene that I feel like doesn't get enough love from most people, and that scene is the one that accompanies Row. Row comes on during the memory of Joel killing the bird as a child, and honestly, I was never one to succumb to peer pressure as a kid like he does in that scene, but the instant regret that you can see on the child Joel's face is so beautiful. I think everyone can relate to that feeling of kissing someone you shouldn't have, or saying something to a friend that crosses a line that you wish you could take back. It's that instant pain in your stomach when you know you messed up and you just wish you could go back and undo it, but it's too late, and now you just have to deal with the consequences. The score swells when that hammer strikes, but instead of being super anxiety inducing or reflecting any of the anger Joel might be feeling towards the other kids in this scene, instead it reflects how solemn it can be when you feel small and alone. But after Joel and Clementine walk away and they turn back into kids, the score changes again, and it's not a sad moment anymore. These are the small moments that build relationships in movies, and Charlie Kaufman as a writer just does that so phenomenally well. Joel's ashamed, and instead of Clementine making him feel bad about it or really dwelling on that moment at all, she just has him come to play and take his mind off of it. She wants him to move past this horrible moment, and he's able to. And the score changes with that. Anyways, the other bleak winter movie that I'll turn to sometimes is David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I tend to rewatch this one at least once a winter just for Rooney Mara's performance alone. She is just absolutely breathtaking in this, unrecognizable, and does such a great job playing such a complex character. But let's keep the video moving. For the sake of this, let's say it's not winter, and I'm moving down the list. It's just depression. When it comes down to just depression, I'm either going to want an upper to hopefully take my mind off things and cheer me up a little bit, or a downer to just make me feel a whole lot less alone. If I want something short, it's probably going to be It's Such a Beautiful Day. This movie is perfect. It's only about an hour long, and it has had such a profound impact on me that I actually got it tattooed. This film is better than any other at getting me to take a step back away from my problems and recognize how beautiful the world still is beyond me. Whether that's writing "I love you" in the sand and a stranger stumbling upon that, or looking outside and realizing that it's kind of a really nice day. I showed my mom this and expected her to have a similarly uplifting reaction, and she instead thought it was one of the most distressing movies she's ever seen in her life, which I guess I can see how it could be interpreted that way, but I would recommend this for seriously anybody. The two long uppers I have are really just superhero movies, and the first is my favorite superhero movie of all time, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Say what you want about the half-baked plot lines and the bad villains, and just everything about this movie I can get is not for some people, but this is one of the 5 greatest romance films of all time, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. I know that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has issues, but the high highs are amazing in this movie, whether that be the opening swinging scene or Andrew Garfield just joking around with Emma Stone, talking about their little list of can't do's. I urge you to put on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and try to pay attention to the best aspects of it, which are the visuals, the romance, and the character work. It is a beautiful movie when you take out some of those studio influences that really bogged it down for most audiences. The scene at the end where the kid stands up to Rhino, cheesy as it may be, is one of my favorites in comic book movie history and captures Spider-Man as a character better than any other movie, I think, in that character's franchise. The other superhero movie is, of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I think Cyborg's arc in this movie is maybe the best we've gotten in superhero movie history. I go back to the "I'm not broken and I'm not alone" scene so often. I text it to my friends, they text it to me. It is perfect. So if I have 4 hours to set aside, I will go back to Zack Snyder's Justice League. Time for the downers, and there are really only 2 short downers that come to mind immediately for me. The first one is Ice Merchants. If you haven't seen Ice Merchants, I'm pretty sure it did get posted to YouTube when it got nominated for the Best Animated Short Oscar. It is amazing. Please go check it out and then come back to this. The art style is absolutely breathtaking, and you get to know all the characters in this movie so well without it having to use a single word, which is such a testament to great filmmaking. I seriously cannot believe this didn't win the Oscar. The other short, depressing movie is my favorite of all time, A Ghost Story. I actually found this movie scrolling through Netflix looking for a lighthearted horror movie and hoping that this would take my mind off of a really bad breakup I was going through. Instead, I was forced to rethink my perception of grief and even some of my life philosophies. Once again, so much is done here without using words, and I have to break down just one scene. So when M, which is Rooney Mara's character in this movie, leaves the house, she's driving away and Daniel Hart is playing this super triumphant score, and then we flash back and the ghost is stuck staring out the window, and that score changes back to one of despair. I'd like to think we've all been the ghost and M in this scenario at some point in our lives. I know I felt like the ghost when one of the best people I've ever met in my life graduated from the college I was going to and went to pursue a master's degree. I was so happy that they were able to follow that dream, but I felt so stuck being left behind in this school. The interesting part about M's role in this situation is she's not even aware of that impact she's leaving behind. I can't be sure that I've ever been the person driving away for anybody, but I'd like to think that everybody has someone who cares for them that much, whether it's when they move away from home or graduate from high school, and you feel like you're on the top of the world, but there's somebody else who feels abandoned. If I'm looking for a long downer, there are really only 2 options for me. The first of which is an exception to my rule. I generally hate TV shows. Like, I will not watch them. And even if I do watch them, I end up stopping after 1 season because I get bored or I feel like the ideas have run out in the writer's room, whatever. Really, the only exceptions to my anti-TV rhetoric is limited series. And the one limited series I come back to every time I start feeling down is Normal People. This is the greatest romance in media history, period. The first time I watched this show, I actually had to take a break when Connell went to therapy because it impacted me so emotionally hard. When Connell calls Marianne outside the bar and she doesn't pick up and he leaves that heartbreaking voicemail, that's just like peak horror fiction. One of the things I love about Normal People is it doesn't fall into the trap that most TV shows do. And that trap is when the main characters don't really change, and they don't necessarily have to change because the fans start to fall in love with who they are in exactly that moment, and then there's no growth throughout the series. Instead of just setting this in high school and following Connell and Marianne's relationship through those 4 years or anything like that, every time I feel like I start to get to know Connell and Marianne, we jump forward in time. And then they're in new situations, they've grown emotionally, and they act in ways that they wouldn't have at the start of the show or even the last episode. It keeps the show super fresh and engaging and keeps Connell and Marianne's relationship growing with the show, which is something that's super beautiful. The other long downer I'll turn to is a film that by all accounts should not be good. This is As I Was Moving Ahead, Occasionally I Saw Brief Glimpses of Beauty. It is comprised entirely of home video footage arranged randomly by the director Jonas Mekas. I remember as soon as I finished this film for the first time, I immediately went to write a review of it so that I could capture the feelings that I was experiencing and never forget that moment that I finished this movie, which is something so special. And it's just really hard to describe the emotional impact that this movie has had on me and the way it changed my feelings and views about nostalgia. Anyways, that is going to complete the flowchart for movies I like to watch when I'm down. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this, maybe took away a couple of recommendations you hadn't thought of in the past. Be sure to comment some movies that you tend to revisit when you're down, because I am always looking for more recommendations. Thank you again for your time and your support, and stay safe this winter.